Welcome to The Romantic Side of Suspense with Sarah Hemmerker. In each episode, she'll talk with your favorite romantic suspense authors. They will take you behind the scenes of the writing process, giving excerpts from their writing, and share stories about their writing life.
Embers in the London Sky by Sarah Sundin. London, 1940. As the German army invades the Netherlands in 1940, Alida van der Zee Martens escapes to London to wait out the occupation. Separated from her 3-year-old son Theo in the process, the young widow desperately searches for her little boy, even as she works for an agency responsible for evacuating children to the countryside. When German bombs set London ablaze, BBC radio correspondent Hugh Collingwood reports on the Blitz, eager to boost morale while walking the fine line between truth and censorship. But the Germans are not the only ones Londoners have to fear, as a series of murders flame up amid the ashes.
On this episode of The Romantic Side of Suspense, my guest is Sarah Sundin, the best-selling author of When Twilight Breaks, Until Leaves Fall in Paris, and a bunch of other World War II historical romantic suspense novels. So welcome to my show, Sarah.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm delighted that we're going to get to chat because I always love chatting with other Sarahs out there.
Yeah.
I
Sarah
think
spelled with an H, yes.
Yes, spelled with an H. I think that one day we should have a Sarah Authors Writers Convention because I feel like I see that name. I see that name. I see our name everywhere. Anyway, I just think that would sometimes be fun. I know we've met a couple of times at the American Christian Fiction Writers, and every time I thought we should have a Sarah table.
We should.
Yeah, so maybe next time we're both there, we can pull that off. But I'm delighted to be chatting with you and in talking about historical romantic suspense novels. And I love this. And I've talked to a few other authors who write historicals with that romance in it and that mystery suspense part of it, which I think is fun. But then you add the Christian part of it, and you have 4 threads to keep in mind. How does that work for you?
Well, actually, I think the Christian part is the easiest part because that's the theme that's kind of running through and what the characters are going through, no matter what's going on in their lives, whether it's just the romance or if it's just historical events. There's always the element. So it's kind of my world. It is my worldview. It's how I see God is active in the world around us. So it's really hard for me to write a story where God isn't part of it.
Right, and then now you have the historical, the romance, the suspense, because all of yours, even though they're set, during World War II, there's also that thread of something else is happening besides the bigger war itself, right?
Yeah.
So how do you kind of juggle all of those and keep all that stuff straight?
Spreadsheets. And I'm actually not joking. And partly it is I'm a very visual person. I need to see everything in front of me so I can keep it straight in my head. There are many writers who just write stream of consciousness and they do it and they get a whole story. I can't imagine doing that. I have to really compartmentalize it. So I actually have a table that I fill out for each book, and I have each scene going in rows, and then I have columns for the romantic plot line and the mystery plot line, if there is one, and any action plot lines and the emotional, spiritual plot lines. And so I kind of track those. And first of all, I tend to that way I don't forget one of the plot lines as I'm writing, and also to make sure each plot line flows in a logical manner, not taking big jumps so it's not like suddenly they hate each other in chapter 1 and by chapter 3 they're madly in love with each other. It doesn't usually work that way. There's usually progression. So I want to make sure each plot line progresses at a natural rate with ups and downs, and so that chart really helps me.
Yeah, I love hearing about how authors, organize all that stuff. because it is important to keep it all straight, and we don't always keep it all in our heads correctly.
I don't, and the older I get, the less likely I am. And also, I found the more books I write, it starts to get more jumbled up, and I have to make sure I'm, not, getting my stories mixed up. So
right.
The charts really help me. So.
Yeah.
But that's not going to work for everybody.
Right. It's not going to work for me. I'll just be honest, Sarah. I am not doing a chart.
Oh, yeah.
But I love it. I think it's a great. I do love hearing about, how we organize things, because our readers are very smart, and they pick up when we make, mistakes. And we're going to make mistakes because we're not perfect. But I'd rather it be a small, tiny one than this glaring. Wow.
Yeah.
You totally dropped this thread. Way to go, author. Not gonna give me a satisfying ending with that, are you? So no. We don't want to frustrate our readers in that manner. So
exactly.
Frustration through the book while they're trying to figure out who the bad guy is, and even though they kind of know that our main characters are going to fall in love by the end of the book, are they really going to fall in love? They have to be a little doubtful about that. How are they going to get there? How are they going to get there? So what drew you to writing about World War II as that historical era in the first place, Sarah?
It's family stories to begin with. I was writing some contemporary stories to begin with, and then I had a story idea that only worked in a historical setting, and I just naturally drifted to World War II. At first, I thought it would be easier because it was more recent, and so I thought I would have less research to do, which I found was ridiculous. But I'm very glad I'm so glad I didn't know that, because I wouldn't have started if I knew how much research I had to do. But I found I love research. I'm a nerd girl. I was a science major, so research is my thing, and I just love it. And now but my grandfather was a storyteller, and he was a pharmacist mate in the Navy, which was a medic, and then his brother was a B-17 bomber pilot. So, and they were storytellers, which I found out later was an unusual reaction to the war. Most people came home and did not talk about it as a way of coping, but my grandfather and his brother were storytellers. That's how they dealt, and I benefited from that. So I heard their stories. And so those are always in my head. And so when I started writing, it just came naturally to me to do World War II. And then as I researched more and more about the era, I really found it so fascinating. I just keep finding angles to explore, new things I haven't written about. And I just keep going.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure your readers are very appreciative that you keep going, keep writing.
There are days, though. There are days.
Yeah, there's always days. I don't think any of us can have any kind of job where there's not days where we love it and then days that we're like, that's it. I'm done. But I'll be honest, one of the reasons that I have not dipped into historical is because I loved history. I was a history minor. I loved reading about it, but I just don't want to do the level of detailed research, frankly, because I'm afraid I'd just get into that rabbit hole and I would just never come out and actually write anything.
Yeah.
So for me, I know myself well enough. I have to do enough, to make my contemporaries believable and stuff, but I don't think I could do it.
Yes. And every once in a while meet a young writer who will say they want to write historicals, but they don't like research. Like, you need to find a new genre immediately, because if you don't love research, it's going to show in your story. And the quality of historical fiction has risen. It's a very high bar now. I think there was a time where you could just kind of, slap a bonnet on the girl and you're fine. But those times are gone, and the quality of historical fiction, the level of research that's being done by the authors out there is phenomenal, and just that love of the detail, the love of the era. And if you don't have that, it's okay. Just find a different genre. There are plenty of genres where you don't have to do that real dig deep into research. But I can't think of a single genre where there isn't some research involved, unless you're writing your own life story over and over again. But Yeah, even if you just want to have her open up a B&B. Okay, well, but how do you go about that? I don't know. I've never opened up a B&B. So I'd have to do some research into that. So there's always a certain amount of research. But, yeah, you can avoid the worst of it by avoiding historical.
No, definitely. No, I definitely do research. Don't worry, readers. I do research for my stories, but I don't have to immerse myself in a whole nother era.
Exactly.
And because I would want to get all those details correct. And I love reading about it. And I can appreciate when I'm reading historical novels that the level of detail that they have, and I enjoy it. I think it's great. Just, you're right. I mean, you have to know what your limits are and what you want to do and what you're willing to do for your readers and what you're not willing to do for your readers.
Yesterday I spent an hour trying to find a restaurant that would have been open in 1942 in my location. So, that's silly. Did
you find it? This is what we want to know. Did you find it?
Oh, yeah, I did.
Okay.
I did.
Good.
So, yes. But yeah, it was, if you're writing contemporaries, you don't really have to worry about that. Yeah, you might have to worry about, what if this restaurant isn't open by the time my book comes out? It'll look dated. But you don't have to worry about, what if it wasn't open? What was it called? People change names. Was it actually a restaurant? So there's just a different, sometimes I'll just make one up, which is fine. In Embers in the London Sky, there's a pub in London where they hang out a lot. And I kept trying to find a pub in the area that was open at the time, and I finally just gave up, and I just made one up. And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's
I know, this is why it's called... Yeah, we are allowed to do that. Because, yes, I like to use contemporary settings, and I had a coffee shop in one of my books that one of my local readers was like, "Oh, I've been there. That was really cool."
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
But you also have to be careful when you're losing real businesses like that. I had to be very, one of the reasons I made my pub fictional was because the pub owner was one of my mystery suspects.
Yeah.
So I have to cast doubt on him.
Right.
Now, if it's a real pub that was owned by a real person, and I don't want to cast doubt on this real person who probably had nothing to do with the murder of my character's uncle. So,
right, yeah.
So,
yeah, exactly.
So there's a certain, especially if you're starting to do anything that could border on potential slander or libel or anything like that, it's best to do something fictional. That way you don't have to worry about it.
Yes. I've made up towns too. Those are always fun to do. Yeah. So I don't have to worry about that. But occasionally I have them running around where I live, and I like to set the stories in Northern Virginia, and that can be kind of fun. But so I know one of the things that I've used a lot is Google Maps and stuff. Do they make those for historical places? Historical era? No.
But I do use it a lot because, for example, my new book set in London, a lot of those buildings are still there. So I can walk down the street. I can see where the buildings are, what they look like. A lot of them were rebuilt like they were. But I do need to be mindful of the damage during the Blitz and where things were moved. Streets will change direction. So I try to find maps from that era and pictures from that era that I will kind of go between them. A lot of the pictures from the World War II era are in black and white. So Google Maps is great, so you can kind of get a little bit of sense of color to it. So trying to add some of those sensory details, especially if I wasn't able to go there in person. But I love Google Maps. I was just walking Google Maps through my little Scottish town yesterday when I was looking for my the railway station, which was built in 1874, and the hotel, which was open in the 1880s. So I was walking those streets. And you can look up at the building that was built modern, and you can just kind of avoid those. But it just get that sense of, most of the buildings are built with gray stone, and, oh, look, they have brick sidewalks, and just to get some of those details down. But, yeah, I love Google Maps.
Yeah, they are fun. They are fun to just to get a sense of the streets and this and that. I was just curious how they would work with, since you are, We're getting further and further away from World War II.
Exactly. So. Yeah, I actually find it a little bit more useful in Europe than I do in America because, I mean, especially where I live in California, we just tear things down, put up new stuff, so there's very little up that's old. But in Europe, they really pride themselves on their history, so there's a lot of older buildings, and they really tried, a lot of the stuff they reconstructed after the war, they really try to make it look like it did before. Not always. Sometimes they put up these modern apartment buildings, but those usually stand out pretty clearly.
Yeah, yeah, they definitely do stand out pretty clearly. So it is interesting, I think, to see how the history, and they have such depth of history in Europe, and maybe that's why they want to preserve it more. In America, we just don't have a lot of those roots in our buildings and stuff, and so we're like, tear it down, throw up a new one. You know?
Exactly.
So,
like it's 20 years old. It's old.
I know. Ancient. Get rid of it. Well, this has been delightful, but we are out of time, Sarah. I know we could keep talking. Is there anything else about your writing or Embers in the London Sky you'd like our listeners to know before we say adios?
Just hope you enjoy the story.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for sharing. This has been a lot of fun to talk with you.
Thanks.
And stay tuned, listeners. I've been talking with Sarah Sundin, and stay tuned, and you can hear a short excerpt from her book, Embers in the London Sky.
Now an excerpt from Embers in the London Sky by Sarah Sundin. The deaths hit close to home for Hugh, and Alida needs his help to locate her missing son. As they work together, they grow closer and closer, both to each other and the answers they seek. But time is running short, and the worst is yet to come. Tilburg, the Netherlands, Friday, May 10th, 1940. As soon as she escaped to England, Alida van der Zee Martens would cut her hair and have her son photographed for the first time. Sebastian approached from behind. Why couldn't her husband ever wait until she finished brushing her hair? Sometimes he interrupted at 17 strokes, sometimes at 31, today at 43. He wove his fingers into her hair halfway down her back, and she tensed. In the bureau mirror, Alida met his gaze. Warm gray today, not chilled steel. Regardless, every muscle stayed taut. He kissed her cheek. Breakfast in 10 minutes, Lele. Yes, Baz. A smile rose. She and little Theodore would never breakfast with Baz again. After he headed downstairs to listen to the morning news, Alida finished brushing her hair. Only 7 strokes remained to remove the feel of him. Not enough, but today of all days she couldn't go above her customary 50 strokes. She set her brush on the silver tray, centered between her comb and her perfume atomizer. At the base of her brush lay her rings. First, she put on her grandmother's sapphire ring, then her engagement ring, which she would sell in London. Her fingers trembled, and she drew back lest she knock something askew, knock her plan further askew. With rumors of German troops massing on the Dutch border, she decided to move up her plan an entire week. But it was a good plan. For the last time, she coiled her hair the way Baz liked. After Baz left for work, while the cook cleaned up after breakfast and the housekeeper scrubbed the downstairs floors, Alida would sneak out a suitcase. She'd already hidden her essentials and Theo's in bureau drawers ready to pack. When the housekeeper went upstairs to scrub the guest rooms, Alida would announce she was leaving for her hair appointment, timed for when her mother-in-law across the street was away for her own hair appointment and wouldn't see Alida and Theo leave with luggage. Tonight, she and her 3-year-old boy would be safe with Tante Marguerite and Uncle James in the English countryside. Yet her fingers still trembled. A voice climbed the stairs. Sebastian's, shouting orders, closer and closer. Her chest seized. Bile rose up her throat, and she gripped the bureau top. "Not today, please." The bedroom door banged open, and Baz wrestled 3 suitcases inside. "We're leaving in 15 minutes. Start packing. Only necessities and valuables. Hurry!" "What?" The word poured out in a breathy haze. She did plan to pack, but not with Baz. He heaved the suitcases onto the bed and flung open his wardrobe. "You have family in England, yeah? A cousin, an uncle?" She'd hoped he'd forgotten. I don't understand." "Don't get hysterical." Baz folded business suits into the large suitcase. "The Germans invaded at dawn. Parachutists landed at airfields and bridges. Tanks crossed the border. I can't possibly run a profitable business under the Nazis, but I can in England." Acid burned her throat, coated the inside of her mouth, corroded her hopes. Baz flicked up his gaze to her. "Pack or don't pack, but we're leaving in 15 minutes. Cook is preparing a hamper of food. The chauffeur is warming up the automobile, and I already have visas and our passports. I planned everything." So had Alida. Her plan covered every contingency, except this.
Thanks for listening to The Romantic Side of Suspense with Sarah Hammerker. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review. You can sign up to receive notifications of upcoming podcasts and listen to previous editions at sarahhammerkerfiction.com.